Yo, what's good? Salutations to nations. It's your boy Young Sinai.
Angel Nine.
Okay, so this video is by GameSpot. It's the complicated business of Pokemon. All right, let's go ahead and check it out. Boom. Hold up. Nintendo is a complicated. I'm not sure what this video is going to talk about specifically, but they have a kind of.
Mario is one of the most recognized.
Sorry, they have a kind of complicated infrastructure because I think it's like owned by Nintendo, but it's also owned by the Pokemon Company, and it's owned by Creatures Inc. So it's like a lot of, I don't know, it's kind of weird, but I don't know what they're gonna talk about. Let's see. All right.
There's a common misconception I see a lot when it comes to Pokemon, that Nintendo owns Pokemon.
Oh, so this is kind of gonna get into what I was talking about. Okay.
Now that is only partially true.
Remember when Nintendo share prices shot up shortly after Pokemon Go was released, only to drop when Nintendo issued a statement informing investors that it did not create Pokemon Go?
I certainly do, and I still can't believe people missed that.
Since Pokemon's inception, the franchise has been synonymous with Nintendo, but it's a lot more complicated than that. Yes, Nintendo plays
Oh, I left Game Freak out of the mix when I just named everything. All right, what am I thinking?
a huge role in Pokemon and its future, especially when it comes to the games.
But Pokemon is entirely its own pocket monster. God, this thing is huge.
Pokemania, as it was called in 1998, took the world by storm, but Pokemon's meteoric rise to success didn't happen overnight. In an interview with Pokemon's creators, Tsunekazu Ishihara and Shigeki Morimoto from 2010, they both recall Pokemon Red and Green's sluggish start. The games were in development for 6 years, and they finally dropped at the end of the Game Boy's life cycle in 1996.
And revived everything. Like the Game Boy was out of here. Then when Pokemon came, oh, heck no. Man, everybody had a Game Boy, man. Oh, it was good. It was good times. There was no time like it for real. Man.
Ishihara put it, they may have missed the last train. But thanks to word of mouth and Korokoro Comic, a Japanese monthly manga magazine, Pokemon began to pick up steam in Japan. Sales grew exponentially, and there was even talk of bringing Pokemon overseas.
But that never happened. Pokemon stayed in Japan, and no one ever really thought about it again. At least we got this cool Pokemon Green version to remember it by. Kidding, of course.
Pokemon made its debut in North America in 1998 with Red and Blue, and the games were followed by a trading card game, a TV show, movies, merchandise, and so.
It's so crazy to think about like how the video game came before the anime.
Much more.
The Pokemon craze was unlike anything.
Oh, let me tell you something. Hold on, let me rewind it. Hold on.
Movies, merchandise, and so much more.
Boom. Okay. You see that Pokedex? I had that Pokedex. Okay, I bought it off a kid. No, I didn't buy it. I traded it from a kid at school. And then my dad was like, rest in peace. He was like, yeah, you have to give it back. You have to trade it back. You know, you have to give them back their toy. I'm like, dude, this isn't a toy. This is a Pokedex. You feel me? Now I look on eBay. Those things going for like $80.
The Pokemon craze was unlike anything the world had ever.
That's the second mistake that my dad made with Pokemon. My bad, y'all. Hold on. I'm hitting all the wrong buttons. I'm getting heated. The other mistake that my dad made with Pokemon is, and I've told this before, I had a Pokemon starter deck, okay? And I had a holographic Machamp in it. And this was the first starter deck. And my dad was like, whatever you do, do not give or trade this card. Whatever you do, do not give it away. Man, I had people coming to me with holographic Charizards. And like nobody really knew the worth or value of these cards. And so I was like, no, my dad told me don't trade it. Don't trade it. Man, I was so stupid obeying my parent.
seen before. It seemingly blew up overnight, and despite all the naysayers, it never really faded away.
Parents should not let their kids watch Pokemon, play Pokemon, buy Pokemon cards, have anything whatsoever to do with Pokemon.
Yo, if you a good parent, make sure that your kid watches Pokemon and plays Pokemon and has everything to do with Pokemon. That's coming from one parent to another.
Because the message is violence.
My son currently thinks that he's Pikachu. He's 3.
There was an incredibly high demand for anything and everything Pokemon that Nintendo, developer Game Freak, and support studio Creatures were simply not equipped to handle. Licensing deals and pitches flooded all 3 offices, and for a while, Ishihara was in charge of that entire department.
As demand grew at an accelerated rate, it became clear that in order to meet that demand, Pokemon needed something centralized. Thus, the Pokemon Center was founded in 1998 as a joint venture between Nintendo, Game Freak, and Creatures, and was later renamed to the Pokémon Company in 2000.
Each entity owns roughly a third of the Pokemon Company, and each organization contributes to the franchise in different...
I want to know who owns which part so I can be mad. I can know which part of the company I'm mad at certain points. Okay, I can blame Nintendo for putting out these lackluster games, okay? Or can I blame Game Freak? I need to know who I'm specifically blaming for different parts of my hate for Pokemon. I love Pokemon, but I'm saying certain parts where y'all know, you know what I'm saying?
different ways, with the Pokemon Company being at the center of it all.
So broadly speaking, Game Freak develops the mainline series, Nintendo publishes the video games, and Creatures handles the cards and spin-offs.
Okay, so I'm mad at Nintendo specifically. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
However, even that is an oversimplification here.
Okay.
These three companies constantly overlap and work in tandem when it comes to Pokemon.
Okay, so I still don't know who I'm mad at.
Example, since Pokemon X and Y, Creatures has been instrumental when it comes to 3D modeling. This cooperative spirit goes all the way back to the beginning, and oddly enough, Nintendo's late president, Satoru Iwata, was an instrumental part of this. At the time, he was the president of HAL Laboratory and a board member at Creatures. HAL Laboratory and Nintendo were tasked with bringing Pokemon's battle mechanics to the Nintendo 64 with Pokemon Stadium.
Did you have Pokemon Stadium? That game was dope. I miss innovation in games, man. That was so cool how you could put the cartridge in the back of the joystick and something. They don't got innovation no more, man. I mean, they do, but it's just something about that time period.
According to Iwata, there was no specification doc, so he did what any president would do. He ported Pokemon's combat system to the Nintendo 64 in a week, a feat that Morimoto, Pokemon's original gameplay designer, didn't know was possible.
As things progressed, Iwata ended up being an unofficial liaison between Nintendo, Game Freak, and Creatures during Pokemon's early years. So what exactly does the Pokemon Company do if it doesn't directly develop the mainline games or create the cards? Well, a bit of everything as it turns out. Localization, marketing, event planning, merch production, and publishing. After all, Pokemon Go was not published by Nintendo. Basically, anything Pokemon related goes through the Pokemon Company at some point or another. And as of 2021, Pokemon as a whole was valued at $92 billion, making it the highest grossing entertainment property of all time.
But hold on, if Game Freak is backed by two of the wealthiest entertainment companies in the world, and they theoretically have the support of thousands of employees across multiple organizations, how come Pokemon Scarlet and Violet look like, well, this?
That's literally what I was about to say. That's why I paused it. But I was like, let him finish his thought. That makes me so angry, man. How Pokemon is worth so much money. It's one of my favorite franchises. How is it that it's worth so much money, but the games look so bad? And on top of it, and this is the part I will never understand, how do they have one of the biggest animes, but all of the games have no voiceovers? Why not just borrow some people from the animes and have them do the voiceovers? Like, I don't understand. But I know why. Is because we keep buying this trash. that they keep selling us. But yeah, man, that's so freaking annoying. Excuse me.
Well, remember, Nintendo does not own Game Freak, and neither does the Pokémon Company. Game Freak is an independent studio and a relatively small one at that, with 169 employees as of 2022. Now, that may seem like a lot, but not every employee was working on Scarlet and Violet in unison. For comparison, Breath of the Wild's development team was nearly double that, with 300 people. Meanwhile, some AAA studios like Naughty Dog and CD Projekt Red have significantly more employees, and they don't regularly release a new game every few years. Since Black and White in 2010, Game Freak has released a new Pokemon generation every 3 years while juggling multiple projects at once, some of which aren't even Pokemon games. In 2015, they teamed up with Sega for Tembo the Badass Elephant. In 2019, they released Little Town Hero for Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One, and they are currently working with...
That game look kind of tight. Hold on, I'm gonna run that back. This game look cool. Pokemon should have some... I wouldn't be mad if a Pokemon game looked like this. Would you guys?
Little Town Hero for Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One.
I wouldn't be mad if a Pokemon game looked like that, I don't think.
And they are currently working with Private Division to develop a AAA action-adventure game called Project Bloom.
Wow.
So when Game Freak is working on a Pokemon game, it is still working with a budget ultimately set in place by the publisher. They can't just dig into the infinitely deep bank account of Nintendo and the Pokemon Company whenever they'd like. And even though these games usher in the new generation, they only account for a fraction of revenue. Merchandise is where the real money is.
Wait, what was that? Hold on. What was
where
that?
the real money is.
Hold on. What is that? What is that? What is that? Somebody in the comments tell me what is this that I'm looking at. What does that have to do with Pokemon?
And let's not forget, Game Freak is still relatively new to the home console market.
Sword and Shield were the first new generation Pokemon games designed for home consoles, and those played it relatively safe. Apart from the open world wild area, Sword and Shield followed the same structure as previous entries. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet were the first mainline Pokemon games to buck the tried and true format. Open world, non-linear progression, new encounter mechanics, and the list goes on. The all too obvious answer here is to throw more time, people, and money at Game Freak, but those things themselves do not equate to a better game. Cyberpunk 2077 was backed by a massive team with an enormous budget, but it still fell short of many people's expectations. We just got Rocksteady's Suicide Squad, which was in development for 7 years, and look how that turned out. Personally, I think Pokemon Scarlet and Violet could have greatly benefited from a longer development cycle. But remember, a Pokemon generation doesn't begin and end with the release of a new mainline entry. It sets the stage for years of new merchandise, TV shows, spin-offs, cards, tournaments, and so much more.
It is a massive, multi-billion-dollar machine that's dependent on a small studio to hit hard deadlines regardless of how many roadblocks there might be.
Staffing up also comes with its own set of issues. Game development is insanely complicated, and scaling up doesn't guarantee a better product. New workflows need to be implemented, communication needs to be streamlined, and new hires need to be trained quickly and efficiently. Not to mention, Game Freak uses its own proprietary engine for the Pokemon series, meaning you can't just hire an Unreal Engine artist off the street and throw them in the mix. You need to train them. Remember when CD Projekt Red announced that they would be switching to Epic's Unreal Engine for Cyberpunk 2 and The Witcher 4? They did it because it's much easier to find and train talent familiar with Unreal. Last year there was...
I mean, that makes sense, you know. That does make sense. But I ain't gonna lie, man. Let me explain something to y'all. So I got ADHD, okay? So he's making a lot of good points, but right now my brain going. But yeah, no, I understand what he's saying as far as the games can't necessarily look better because the portion that owns Pokemon doesn't necessarily have, it can't tap into the deep pockets of Pokemon because it's spread out, but I wish they could get with one of these third-party developers that they work with these other games and do something for Pokemon, because that AAA game they're working on, that mother looks super dope. Imagine if it was a Pokemon game that had those type of graphics. Like, man, all right. It's been real. I appreciate y'all rocking with me. Please subscribe, okay? I am on my journey to 1,000 subs. Thank you for everyone who has subscribed. I appreciate y'all kicking it with me. And salutations to the nations. Peace.
Angel Knot.